Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's a creepy occurrence that happened to you that still bothers you to this day? Please remember to like, share, comment, hype, listen, and ask for shoutouts, and subscribe.
I was about 9 or 10. I was having a pretty scary dream. I dreamt I could see a load of impaled heads at the end of my nan's garden. Before I could wake up properly, I heard the most horrifying woman scream, ear-piercingly loud. I opened my eyes and I couldn't see anything, just a face. I shut my eyes as quickly as I could. I opened them again, and it was my bedroom, as normal. I climbed down my bunk bed and my CD player was open. The screen on my TV was on a static channel, and all my perfectly lined up model cars on my shelf were scattered on the floor. It was sweltering hot, and I remember feeling freaked out. Turns out the old woman who lived across the road had died, and the ambulance was outside her house. My parents had gone over the road, and our house was empty. I didn't sleep for about a week after that. When I was a kid, probably 5 to 6 years old, I would stay at my grandparents' house, and I would be in bed and remember getting out of bed, going to the top of the basement stairs, and there would be people on the side of the stairs in white, and they would tell me to jump and not be afraid, and I would jump and float down the stairs, and they would basically make sure I didn't fall till I got to the bottom, and then they would help me back up, and I would end up in my bed, and it wasn't a dream. Sometimes I would end up in my room, and sometimes my grandparents would find me in the basement, and I told them the people downstairs told me to come here. I have no idea what that meant, but I knew it was not a dream, and I wasn't sleepwalking. I saw those people clear as a bell. Bizarre. My parents' house was haunted. When I was a teenager, one weekend day, my parents and brother went to a hockey game. I didn't want to go, so I stayed home. We knew something was in the house, but we had never seen anything face-to-face or head-on. Most of it was seen out of the corner of our eyes, or we would see a questionable shadow. I have a story of the shadow figure, but it's not scary, so. Anyway, they were gone and I was alone. I was listening to music through my headphones in the living room, and I closed my eyes. When I opened them, there was a little boy standing in the middle of the room looking right at me. He was sepia-toned. His hair was dark, his skin was white, shirt and pants, no color. He didn't move or say anything. As soon as I saw him, I closed my eyes and started praying to God to please make it go away. I opened my eyes and he was gone. I never saw him again, but years later, long after I'd moved out of the house, one of my brothers was the last one awake. He went to turn off the living room lights. There was a panel of knobs and switches right by the entry to the kitchen. And behind him, he hears a kid say, "Hi there." He turns the light back on, turns around and looks around the room and says, "Hello? Hello?" Nothing. So he turned out the lights and went to bed. Years after that, my dad had passed. Now, all of us are moved out, and my mom has remarried. Her and her husband would be sitting watching TV. My dad had built a kind of foyer, and built a wall for the living room and added French doors, because the front door and back door faced each other and let in cold drafts in the winter. My mom and her husband would watch TV in the living room and leave the French doors open when the weather was nice. She said they frequently would hear a child singing in the foyer area when they watched TV. When I was 8 to 9 years old, I was temporarily home alone while my mom was out with her friend. The bathroom in the apartment had a door that separated the toilet and bathtub from the sink. I had that door closed. I finished up taking a shower and heard the door knock 3 times. I immediately knew it wasn't my mom since she would call my name or open the door. I asked, "Who is it?" Nobody answered. I opened the door and I saw a tall, pitch-black shadow figure about 5 feet in front of me and just disappeared around the corner. I had 4 parakeets during that time, and they were dead quiet. They were also always loud, always making noise. After about 5 minutes, my mom and her friend come back, and I tell them about it. Her friend said it was probably a demon. First and last time I seen it. I'm in my 30s now, and it's something I will never forget. I canoe and camp. I love to be in the woods. A few years ago, we found a lake that was absolutely breathtaking. It was one hell of a portage to get into, and one out of it turned out to be even more difficult. The first night we spent on that lake, I was sitting by the fire with my friends. and made a comment about how I'd die 50 years from then. I'd love to be left in the woods right here. Just one of those kind of things that didn't mean much at the time. When we were getting the gear ready for the portage out, I found an urn tucked away next to a rock. Someone walked their loved one through at least one of these portages to leave them in what's genuinely one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. That we found it so soon after I said that's what I wanted has kind of stuck with me for years now. I have handfuls of small occurrences, but this one always stuck with me. I was babysitting my cousins pretty early in the morning. They were still asleep, so I was having breakfast and quietly watched TV. All of a sudden, one of the little doors in the TV console popped open, even though it should be impossible because they're child-locked. I thought it was weird, but maybe it was just a fluke, and closed it, but right as I did so, the baby monitor I had with me started beeping loudly from low battery, even though the mom handed it to me from the charger earlier. It definitely made me jump, but I still tried to stay logical. But when I put the monitor on the charging port, it started going crazy. It was all loud static that also sounded like voices. Then it was quiet, until I heard a man's heavy breathing coming out of it. At that point, I was frozen until I realized I need to run a baby's room, because what if some freak was actually there? There was nothing. Baby sleeping peacefully in his crib. The young sister was also still sleeping in her room. I called my mom and let myself freak out with her. After that, nothing happened except for one time. I thought I saw someone go behind the couch, and of course, I thought it's the sister trying to scare or prank me. So I came around and said, "I know you're back there." But there was just empty space. She was still in her room. Of course, things only happened when I was there to babysit, but I tried to ignore everything because I don't want to feed whatever it was more energy, so I shrugged it all off and eventually the activity stopped. When I was a kid, we lived in a 2-story row house in Brooklyn. The bedrooms were at the top of a long flight of stairs. My mother was a nut and hated anything hung up on the newel post at the bottom of the steps. I was in my room, and she called up to me to come downstairs and get my purse, which was hanging on the newel post. A few moments later, I walked out of my room intending to go down the steps to get the purse, but instead found it being held by invisible hands on one of the wooden posts at the top of the stairs in the hallway. There was no way that purse could ever have been thrown up and landed in such a way that it held itself up. Plus, she had never thrown anything up the steps before, nor would she. I stopped dead in my tracks, knowing I was seeing something crazy. Wish I had a cell phone for a photo, but this was back in the 70s. I worked at a cemetery, and the day prior, we had just put a 16-year-old girl in the vault inside the mausoleum. She had passed in a pretty serious car accident. I'd been there quite a while and never witnessed anything that made me spooked. My job was to open the mausoleum, make sure everything was vacuumed up, and make sure everything was ready for the day. As I'm vacuuming the side she is on, I see a young girl's head pop around the corner at the back of the mausoleum. I can't really see a face, but I can sense a smile, if that makes sense. I'm thinking 6 or 7 years old. This is early in the morning before 7 a.m. I did not hear the door or any footsteps. Kind of ignored it, kept vacuuming. Then I see her again. I turn my head to look the way and she hides again. At this point I smile too and say out loud, "I know you're here, and you're not as sneaky as you think," in a playful tone. I never saw her again or felt it happen again. I think it was just a way for the young girl who passed to let me know that she was okay now. I'm not a religious man by any means, but it did make me think a little.
Little paranormal remix, and I think people took the literal title of this to be a little bit more paranormal than maybe it was, but still good creepy stories to keep you up at night. Hope you guys are doing well, and yeah, on site today, raining out here in New York. Hope you guys are doing well. Talk to you tomorrow.
I've got a terrifying story from a few weeks ago, and I'm honestly still not sure if it was a ghost or just my mind playing tricks on me, but something felt wrong that night. It was around 2 a.m. and I was staying at my grandmother's house in a quiet old part of Jaipur. The house is pretty ancient, and there's this room at the end of the hall that no one ever goes near. People say it's haunted, but no one talks about it too much. I always brushed it off as superstition until that night. I was just about to drift off to sleep when I started hearing whispers from the hallway. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I distinctly heard my name being whispered, soft and urgent. It was coming closer, and then I heard slow, deliberate footsteps outside my door. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I tried to gather the courage to open the door, but I couldn't. The footsteps stopped right outside my room, and the air turned freezing cold. I swear I could feel something, someone, standing just on the other side. I stayed under the blanket, terrified to even peek. When I finally managed to fall asleep from exhaustion, the whole night felt like one long nightmare. The next morning, nothing unusual had happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, especially from that room at the end of the hall. That door never opened, but something felt very, very wrong. True story. Years ago, I moved into a very old farm-style house on a small holding. My first evening there, this happened. My partner walked into our bedroom carrying a chair from the bar area of the house. The house was halfway furnished, and as my partner walked into the bedroom with the chair, I saw this old lady sitting on top of the chair. At the same moment, my cat jumped off the bed, hissing, and hid under the bed and wouldn't come out. That evening, I fell asleep and woke up sometime during the night. But I was paralyzed. This was not sleep paralysis. I was completely awake. This woman was sitting on my chest, shaking me awake, saying, "Get up and run, or they'll kill you." I somehow managed to get up, peered through the side of the curtain, and saw a group of people busy breaking into our house. Called a local response team and got it sorted. The next night, the same thing happened with the woman, but there was nobody there trying to break in that night, so I didn't think much of the incident the second time around. Even though this time she said that I should leave the house because something will happen. Fast forward, one day, some months after that, I walked around the property, it was massive, and ventured into the fields surrounding the property and other small holdings with my dog. We walked past a row of graves, not a graveyard, but literally some random bodies of who knows who buried just at the bottom of our fence line. Suddenly, the sky above us darkened and the dog freaked out like crazy. I felt this force coming, and every instinct in my body screamed, "What the f-?" The sky completely closed and darkened like it was going to storm in mere seconds. Yet before that, there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. Suddenly, this massive, like 4 meters long hand extended out of the sky and came straight toward us. The dog bolted, and I bolted with the dog. So, I still told myself after all of this and more strange things that happened, and the ghost lady who both warned me in time for the first break-in and then warned me the second time that I'll die there, that this is somehow nothing. Fast forward, about 2 weeks after this graveyard incident, a group of people broke into our property and proceeded to chase us down. We had to climb our own electric fence to escape. Didn't see them coming until they were literally at our door and we just ran. They proceeded to chase us. We ran into the open field and finally found a tar road, all farm roads and dirt roads in that area. And on that tar road, we found a patrolling police van. At one stage, I had to climb over a wired fence, so I was pretty much wearing torn shorts, no shirt, and only a bra at that stage, covered in blood, cuts, wounds, etc. The police locked us in their van, refused to get us medical assistance, and literally took us back to the scene of the crime and left. We moved the next day. I still remember the old ghost lady, and I still want to know how she knew this was going to happen. But that ghost, well, she kind of saved my life. One night, got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and I saw someone standing in front of the big window in the front of the house. I thought it was my dad, but turns out when I was going back to bed, I could hear him snoring in his room, and the silhouette was too big to be my mom or brother. Safe to say I started sleeping with a bat after that. This happened about 7 years ago. My parents live out in the country with cornfields surrounding them, and nearest neighbors are 3 miles down the road. I was living with them at the time this experience happened. I got off work at 11 p.m. and headed home. As I was about ready to pull into the driveway, something told me to look in the cornfield to my left. So I did, and something about 7 to 8 feet tall with piercing red eyes was standing there watching me. I quickly pulled into the driveway and sat in my car for a few, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. After I worked up the courage to get out of my dumb self, looked over that way, and this thing was now standing at the end of the driveway. I got inside and my sister came up to me asking if I had seen the thing outside with the red eyes. I told her yes, and she replied back with, "It's been standing outside ever since it got dark outside." Fast forward to about 2 to 3 hours, and we were in the living room with the curtains pulled, and I go to see if it was still there, and it was on the porch, peering into the house, scratching at the window, hissing. To this day, I can't hardly sleep without seeing or hearing that thing in my dreams. I'm kind of afraid of the dark after that incident as well. In the late 1970s, when I was about 7, we moved into a new-to-us house. Soon after, I had a dream about a little boy sitting at an angled drafting art desk, counting pennies one by one, sliding them in an arc from one side of the table to the other in the room that was now my sister's bedroom. He was wearing a 2-piece button-up pajama set and had glasses on. Behind him on the wall was one of those old phones that you held an earpiece to your ear but talked into the box on the wall. One night after that, I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I finished, washed my hands, turned off the light, and opened the door. When I walked out into the hallway, that little boy was walking toward me with his arms held out like he wanted me to come to him. I walked backwards until I ran into the wall. He was still coming toward me. I fell to my butt, covered my eyes, and started screaming. The next thing I knew, my parents were there and took me to their bed. In the morning, when we discussed what happened, they told me it was just a dream, and I had nothing to be scared of. Knowing that I wasn't crazy, I decided to go into my sister's room and look around. Right there on the wall, where I saw the old phone hanging in my initial dream, there were 2 old holes with mounting brackets that had been painted over. Strange coincidence, or did I really experience something I can't explain? I'm 54 now, and still remember all of it like it was yesterday. My experience haunts me till this day. I lived in a very old house in Pennsylvania, about 113 years old. My husband owns it, and he bought it when he was 22 years old, quite a while before he met me. He'd always told me about a lot of things that happened at the house, but I wasn't sure I could believe the extent of the stories. He would never lie to me, but I feel I needed my own sort of validation, which I eventually got. I witnessed certain things in the house and even videoed my daughter's bedroom and all of her battery-operated toys moving around and making noise in the middle of the night. I always came up with a reason or an excuse of why or how certain things could have happened until the day I had a very horrifying experience. I always felt like there was something in the house that didn't like me for whatever reason. Earlier in the day, I was blow-drying my hair and accidentally touched the plug and socket, which was temperamental. I got a very bad shock. About 2 hours later, I was standing in the kitchen, and there was nobody else in the house. I was standing in the middle of the room and felt an ice-cold, bony hand on each of my shoulders, and then it shoved me clear across the kitchen to where I almost fell on my face. My husband was outside, and I was so freaked out, I ran out of the house screaming like a maniac. I explained what happened, and he basically said, "I told you so." The very next day, I got immensely sick and was admitted to the hospital, and for 9 days with the worst case of pneumonia the hospital had ever seen, and they didn't think I was going to survive it. I don't smoke, I don't have asthma, and I've never had pneumonia in my life, and it just came out of the blue. Needless to say, I live about a mile from the house my husband still owns. I have an apartment I'm renting because I am petrified to be in that house alone at any given moment. I believe that the electric shock enabled whatever spirit or spirits that live in the house to physically make a connection with me. I believe it was a female from the bone structure, and I believe it's very attached to my husband because he's lived there over 10 years. I always sensed something in that house that did not like me. My husband refuses to part with the house and always says that house is alive with a mind of its own. So I'm wondering, is it possible that the electric shock allowed this spirit to physically connect with me? This spirit seemed angry and very evil, and I believe was the reason why I got pneumonia and almost died. I always believed there was a possibility of spirits on Earth, but I've never witnessed anything so validating until that experience. My mom, sister, and I visited our grandparents' house for the summer. One night, my mom and grandparents decided to go out, leaving the three of us behind, my sister, our dog, and me. As you enter the house, there are 3 rooms lined up on one side: the guest room, the brother's room, my grandparents' room. Right besides their room was the kitchen at the end of the house. I was sitting on the floor with our dog, who was barely 2 to 3 months old, and having some ice cream. My sister had gone to the brother's middle room to take a shower. Out of nowhere, the pup got up. He walked into the first room, guest room, and sat down. Staring into the corner, the room was completely dark, pitch black. I was shit scared, so I called him back. Just a few minutes later, I saw a figure cross the room and was sitting and getting to the kitchen. My heart effing sank. I called out for my sister multiple times, thinking it was her, but I got no response. A few minutes passed. Then my sister walked in casually, and I was shooketh. I told her everything I had just seen. She brushed it off, saying I was just overthinking for no reason. I tried to calm down, but then 10 minutes later, she saw it too. She saw a figure standing in front of the dining table. At first, she thought it might be the maid's daughter. We both called out, but there was no response. And then it hit us. The main door had been locked from the outside before our family left. There was no way anyone else could have been inside the house. We then called our family and cried and begged them to come back home because of how scared we were. When I was around 7 years old, I was playing hide and seek with my cousin outside. At the time, my mom and I were living with my great-grandpa, and he had a shed or garage building that he had built himself decades prior. The entire property is surrounded by forest, and we live in Appalachia, so there was already a weird air about the place in general. The inside of the building was probably 20 plus feet from the opening to back wall, and about 12 feet across roughly. It was a plain dirt floor all the way to the back with wooden platform against covering the back wall with a small window above the platform. The shed had no internal lights and so was dark during the day except for the sunlight coming from that window. While I was looking for my cousin, I looked inside the shed, and I remember looking at the window and seeing a man pop up from below and looking at me. The man was very strange and abstract. He was black and white like ink and paper, with splotches and stripes up and down his skin and clothing. It was as if his clothing was his skin too, and it was just shaped differently to give the appearance of clothing. He smiled at me and raised his hand to wave. His hand was gloved and had purple and green on it. I remember this vividly because it was the only thing on him in color. I remember feeling an intense feeling of fear and immediately ran away and inside my house nearby. I tried telling my uncle and my mom that somebody was out there, and even my cousin claimed to have seen him after the fact. But nobody followed up, and they just dismissed it as kids having an overactive imagination. To this day, I have no idea what it was I saw, but I am certain that I saw it. While I was living there, I had many other strange occurrences, including waking up to see my bedroom door wide open and then closing itself, hearing heavy breathing outside of my window while waking up sometime after midnight, and the sounds of drums and chanting coming from the forest nearby. I lived in a house in Sacramento when I was 17 with just me and my mom. One day my cat died in my arms from cancer. I was devastated. The next day I came home from school and the air was thick and everything felt off. Then things started happening. Footsteps would run up and down the stairs and stop right at my bedroom door. I would hear someone crawling around on the floor when I was trying to go to sleep. Cabinets would smash shut out of nowhere. You would always feel like someone is watching you with intense hate. Sometimes I could feel fingertips graze the hair out of my face when I was trying to fall asleep. I had dreams of an angry man with his dog yelling at me. One time I heard the loudest growl at the foot of my bed and then a flash of bright light that lit up the whole room. But then, the most horrible thing I will never forget. I was laying in bed at 10 p.m., trying to sleep for school, when I felt spooked. I opened my eyes and dozens of hands and arms are coming out of the ceiling in the darkness toward me. I closed my eyes and felt like the world stopped spinning for a second. I open them and see the hands. I scream as loud as possible, and it feels like I'm screaming in terror for so long, begging for my mom. She finally comes to check, and the hands are gone. It was horrifying. When I left for college, my mom said she woke up to a bright light in my room. Then everything went back to normal and nothing ever happened again. The end. Scary experience many years ago still haunts me. When I was 11 years old in the early 80s, I had an experience so remarkable that I remember it often still to this day. I'm in my early 50s now. It was a Friday evening and we had visitors, and I wanted to impress them with my pet mouse. The mouse just happened to be small, brown variety. Sometime during the night, the mouse slipped out of my hands and escaped under the cabinets in the kitchen. I looked for a long time that evening, but never caught the mouse. At some time in the evening, I fell asleep on the couch in the living room. It was very common for our family to stay up late watching TV on Friday evenings, and it was very common for my mother to leave me asleep undisturbed on the couch. At approximately 3 or 4 in the morning, I woke up, and as I raised off the couch, I could see a small white mouse running around the kitchen floor. The living room and kitchen were joined. I was very excited, believing I was finally going to catch the mouse. Oddly though, I knew it wasn't my mouse because of the color, yet I was compelled to follow this mouse around trying to catch it, all the while kind of believing it was my mouse. I would get close and almost catch mouse, but it was always a step out of reach. After several minutes of this, I realized I was now back in the living room near the front door. As the mouse got closer to the front door, I saw it swing wide open by itself, and even though I knew the mouse was incapable to open this door, I knew it had. At this point I was determined, and so I followed the mouse out the front door, across the front of our house, and then down the side of our house. About midway to the back of the yard, I became ferried, and that's when I realized I was being trapped, that something terrifying waiting for me in the backyard, and the mouse was a trick. I turned around and ran back to the front door, which was still open. When I entered the door, I realized that whatever was waiting for me in the backyard was already in the house. I don't recall seeing it, I just knew it was there. And my next memory is feeling myself floating in the air with light swirling all around me. Then it was morning, and I was waking from the couch, believing I had dreamed the whole thing. 30 years later, my mother and I were talking, and the subject of the old house came up, and that's when she told me she saw me floating in the air one morning with bright light swirling around me, that she could see me from her bedroom down the hall, and that she was terrified and couldn't move. After some time, she gained courage and came to check on me. I was sound asleep back on the couch. She kind of thought she dreamt it too, but stated she never forgot if that's when I shared my experience. What happened to me?